Today on Detroit Muscle, we get knee-deep in carburetor land by showing you how to save big buku dollars by swapping out a used-up Q-Jet for a second-hand 4-barrel that you can rebuild in an afternoon. Also, see what AMC had up their sleeve when they went Corvette hunting with a steel 2-seater rocket.
You know, folks, back in the day when it came to muscle cars, well, it was all about 4s, 4 barrels, 4 speeds. And there were several schools of loyalties about the type of carburetors that would sit on top of the intakes of the engines.
That's no kidding. And there were a couple that ruled a roost. And if you've ever been in a conversation about carburetors, there is one that always seems to come up, and that is the old Quadrajet. Now this thing come on anything from a 69 Camaro, a Buick GS, or even a Pontiac GTO.
Yeah, about 20 years altogether. And if you ever knew anybody who had to mess with one after it was getting kind of worn out, well, they're going to tell you they get really ornery toward the end of their lifespan.
The Quadrajet carburetor never really was designed to be a performance application, and they don't really have that set CFM that you think of that the aftermarket companies have. And to try to get these things tuned just right, well, you can say they're definitely complicated.
Yeah, because they were so complicated and complex, they were a lot more expensive to get repaired or rebuilt, much less replaced with a new one. In fact, I've heard of people paying over $700 just to buy a new one to put on their old engine.
There are some more affordable options out there. You could pick up a new Edelbrock carburetor, which is a pretty popular conversion. Or you could pick up a used one, throw a kit in it, and save yourself some more cash.
Here's the Carb rebuild kit we got from Edelbrock. It comes with everything we need to rebuild the internals of our car. We also got this accessory kit that comes with a filter, new line, and this very important piece. It's an adapter plate that allows you to put an Edelbrock Performer Carb on a spread bore, aka Q-Jet intake. Now this will get rid of some of those hoops you'd have to jump through to use that carb.
4-barrel carburetors come in 2 different port patterns. It's called the square and the spread bore. Now the Quadrajet has the big and littles, where the Edelbrock has the same size of 4. And you can see that these are nowhere near lining up, neither are the bolt holes. That's why we need that adapter plate.
Why don't you give me that Q-Jet and I'll get it out of the way for you.
There you go. Now with all that said, it's time to get dirty. Now to do the rebuild, you don't need a whole lot of special tools. You're just gonna need a couple different size flat tips and a good pair of needle nose. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna go ahead and scrape out all this old dirt and stuff from the dirt dauber nest, because whenever we dip this thing into the solution, it'll keep it cleaner a little longer. Man, they built a pretty good house.
We'll start the teardown by unscrewing the choke cable bracket. After that, the fuel inlet fitting can come off as well. After its retaining clip comes off, the accelerator pump linkage is disconnected. Then there's another one of those little pins holding the choke shaft linkage.
Next up is removing the screws, which give you access to the metering rods on the top of the carb. Don't forget about these 2 little piston springs. Then we can begin unscrewing the top half of the carburetor. And whenever you're taking this top plate off, you want to make sure to flip it over this way. Not hanging off to the side like that, because you can make these little pins that hold the float in fall out. Next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and get these floats out of the way. It's pretty simple. You just push this little brass rod from one side to the other, and then lift it out of the way. Go ahead and get the needle out of the way. Whenever you're removing the seat or installing it, you want to make sure to use a wide enough screwdriver to fit across both sides of it.
The old gasket that came with the carb has seen better days. And we've got a new one thanks to our kit. After the accelerator pump is removed, we'll get to work unscrewing the accelerator pump discharge nozzle, aka the squirter. The primary and secondary venturi are each held in place by 2 screws.
The fuel bowl baffles need to come out, and one of them is kind of stubborn. Yep, it's stuck. Next thing we're going to do is to take out our secondary and our primary jets, and you want to make sure not to get these confused with each other. And don't forget those two little bitty pieces, the discharge weight and the check ball. We've almost got this thing tore down. The idle mixture screws need to come out, and it looks like I missed a rubber cap.
Now, before we start rebuilding, we're going to take all the reusable metal parts and soak them in this parts cleaner, overnight preferably. Now, be careful, don't use any plastic or rubber in here, or when you take them out, they'll be gone.
We've got our carb torn down, but all those goodies have to go back in there somewhere. Still ahead, we go step by step into the rebuilding process and show you some useful tips while we're at it. Stick around.
Well, the rebuild can officially begin now after soaking the carb and components overnight. You know, one thing about this guy, clean is his middle name.
Yeah, that's kind of right. No matter what you're doing, whenever you're doing a project similar to this one, you want to make sure that your work surface, along with the components that you're going to be assembling, is nice and clean.
Well, along those lines, you want to give extra attention to this body because there are all kinds of ports and threaded holes in here and crevices you can't really see. So the best way to make sure you got everything cleared of obstructions is with compressed air.
We're going to start off by installing a new set of floats. When we got our old carburetor, well, it hadn't had any fuel in it in many moons. So we really don't know the condition of our floats here. And the way you would check to see if a brass float is bad or not, and that's if it had any fluid on the inside. Since we don't know, for cheap insurance, we're going to go ahead and install a new set. Now, before we can drop in place our float, we have to install our needle and seat. If you were going for a little bit more of a performance side, well, Edelbrock offers a high flow unit. Or if you're planning to jump a few bridges or something, well, they make what's called an off-road unit. It has a spring in it and it stabilizes the needle a lot better than stock. Now, with these style carburetors, they can come with two different type of fuel filters. One is the style that goes on the end of the needle and seat, and the other goes right behind the fuel inlet. You can use either or, but not both.
Like we said when this seat came off, make sure you use the right size screwdriver for the job.
Now with these installed, we can check our float level. Now all you need to do is take a 7/16 drill bit and lay it right up under there. You want to make sure that the gasket's installed though. That one needs to be lifted, so does that one. Now whenever you go to tweak this float, you do not want to bend it down and have it on top of the little needle in there because you're running a risk of damaging it. So just use a pair of needle nose pliers to hold the brace and then do whatever you need to. See where we're at. That's it. With that done, now we need to measure the float drop. You just want to flip it up and make sure the gasket is up to the base of the carburetor. Looks like we're about 1 inch and say 6/32, and we need to be at 15/16. Just want to support the float and then bend this little bitty old tab. There we go. Let's try it. That's pretty much it. Now to finish off our top plate, all I've got to do is swap out this sealing washer with a new one that comes in the kit and then spin it into place. But since we're kind of in the measuring mood, Joe's got something he wants to show you.
What I'm going to do is use this little ruler from the kit to measure the opening of the secondary in relationship to the primary. Just as the secondary starts to open up, there should be 13/32 of an inch between this bore edge and the primary blade, and we're right at 12. We're close, but we can make it perfect by removing this rod. And if we make it just a little bit longer, should be right on the money.
Up next, we'll check out an AMC pocket rocket that broke the mold when it came to thrust to weight ratios. Then we complete our carb tutorial by showing you how to put the finishing touches on a 4-barrel rebuild.
You know, we're always talking about the big three: Ford, GM, Mopar. But let's not forget there was a fourth fighter in the muscle car wars, one that pushed the envelope and kept the big guys on their toes. AMC, that is American Motors Corporation. And from 1968 through 1970, they produced what many car guys consider to be a very vicious underdog muscle car.
Detroit Muscle salutes the American Motors Experimental.
After lackluster sales in 1967, American Motors needed to stir up the pot with some new offerings. Their answer? A new pony car they called the Javelin, and their hot new two-seat fun car, the AMX. It was a mid-year offering with the right combinations. Short wheelbase for handling, lightweight for speed, and big power for go.
It's an attention getter. You know, most people I encounter have never even seen one, don't know what it is. It's almost more fun to drive now than it was back then because it's just such a unique and rare vehicle.
The X was for experimental and an effort for AMC to shed its economy car image. It was touted as the first steel-bodied two-seat American performance car since the '57 T-Bird. And the design came from several experimental prototypes, including the '65 Tarpon concept and American Motors '66 Vignale, which featured a throwback rumble seat.
No room for a rumble seat in the AMX, or a back seat for that matter. The cockpit was clean and sporty, with deep set gauges, bucket seats, chevrons on the door panels, and a wood grain steering wheel. On the performance side, it was pure muscle. Heavy-duty suspension, high-performance rubber, dual exhaust, and 3 V8 options. The standard 290, the 343, and the Big Daddy AMX 390. Forged steel crankshaft and connecting rods were used for strength, and the power was impressive. 315 horses, 425 pound-feet of torque shot this pocket rocket from 0 to 60 in just under 7 seconds. The optional Go package added a posi rear, heavy-duty shocks and springs, and power disc brakes.
Minimal changes in '69 included some new paint schemes like this one in Big Bad Blue. Todd Harrison bought his 390 with less than 30,000 on the odometer. All she needed was a little engine work.
You can drive these cars with 3 fingers. 3-4 inches either way makes a world of difference right now. I got to learning about the production numbers on the car, and there just weren't that many out there. The way they drive, the short wheelbase, not a lot of them around. I like being kind of unique or individual.
Production numbers were limited, and emblazoned on the dash was a number plate that made owners feel exclusive, except they didn't really correlate to anything. Like the previous year, the wheelbase on the AMX was 12 inches shorter than the Javelin, making it ideal for the racetrack.
When you're accelerating to pass a car, it just gains so much speed so fast, it's just like, what's going on here?
1970 was the final year for the AMX two-seater. That's when American Motors moved their experimental moniker over to the Javelin, which went on to win 4 out of the next 5 Trans Am championships. Todd sums up his love for the AMX in 3 words.
Rinse, wash, and enjoy.
Now think about this, at a featherlight 3,100 pounds, the 390 was putting out 1 horsepower for every 9.5 pounds of car. Nice. Well, guys, we're about elbow deep in this Edelbrock carburetor rebuild we're doing.
And since I finished up the top half, Mr. Joe here, well, he's gonna throw some parts into the main body.
I like that Mr. Joe part. Yeah, we got quite a pile of parts to get through, so we better get started. Oh, one thing to check, however, this pump bore needs to be perfectly smooth, and if you take your finger in here, you can tell if it's got a rough spot. If it does, you need to polish it out with some fine grit sandpaper. The gaskets will need to go on before the Venturis can be seated in place. Make sure the vent tubes are oriented towards the middle of the car. Then the secondary valve weight shaft can be seated, with the remaining Venturis going in place on top of it. Next, we want to drop in this little check ball, followed by a weight. Oh, for your information, some carbs use a spring like this instead of the weight. Well, next we're ready to install this jet pump housing, and this little squirter on the housing could be the root of a problem if you have one of those stumbles at a stoplight, like your engine's popping and kind of starve for fuel. Now, if you find that happening, you might discover that going to a higher volume squirter or increasing the stroke of the accelerator pump will alleviate that problem. Speaking of the pump, you might notice that the kit comes with this blue seal. There's the old pump, and so does the new pump. The reason for that is because the newer material is built to be compatible with modern gas mixes containing things like ethanol. The jets can be threaded in now. Now be careful not to mix up which one goes where. Next pair of these fuel bowl baffle plates. Okay, let's get these guys together. What do you think?
I think you're doing a great job.
There they are.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and put in our idle mixture screws. Now, the thing you wanna look at on these things is to make sure the taper of this thing doesn't have a groove wore into it. If it does have one, they need to be replaced.
The metering rods go in on top of the piston springs, which determine how much vacuum it takes to open the secondaries.
Now, we went ahead and installed our stock springs, but they do offer an assortment pack. That way you can dial it into whatever your application is.
There's not much left to it now. The accelerator pump linkage can be replaced, and you may notice how shiny this stuff is. That's because we decided to pop for some replacement Edelbrock bracketry. Just look at that choke shaft linkage.
Well, there you go. Using that adapter that we told you guys about earlier, and then spending a weekend can wake your engine up and save yourself a few $100 at the same time.
I'll buy that. Now, if you're still intimidated with all this stuff, though, don't worry. Summit Racing's got all kinds of carb books with illustrations and step-by-step details, so no excuses now.
But I could come up with an excuse.
You have. Whether it's your prized muscle car or your plain old daily driver, heat is your engine's #1 enemy. Well, this could be your #1 weapon against heat. It's DEI's exhaust wrap. Use it on header tubes to protect your plug wires, on downpipes to improve velocity, or many other ways. It reduces temperatures 50% and improves exhaust flow for added power. Each kit includes a 2-inch by 25-foot roll of wrap and steel locking ties. Now, for about $26, it's a pretty cool investment against harmful heat.
Have you ever had to fight with those old, unreliable interior clips whenever you're trying to put the interior back into an old car? If so, you might want to check out one of these Mag Daddy kits. These kits contain a variety of Mag Daddy durable, dependable magnetic fasteners. They're uniquely designed to fit on various makes and models to eliminate noisy rattling from loose door panels and interior trim pieces. The Mag Daddy fasteners allow you to adjust panels at different heights for whatever you're working on, and then they simply just attach magnetically. Kits start at around $74.
Here's something for you guys with 68 and 69 Camaro RSs from Detroit Speed. It's an electric headlight door kit that replaces the stock vacuum actuated system. The kit comes with a pair of electric actuators with brackets, a control module, and wiring harness, and you can pick up one from Summit Racing for about $425.